In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this cute pumpkin pie basket using jute twine. And we're going to be using some natural colored jute twine and some orange jute twine. And this is a cream color. It's not quite white. It's more like a winter white or an off-white for the whipped cream. I made it with this colored jute twine. This is a set of jute twine that I got to make this basket. And this little whipped cream here is the handle to lift the lid off the basket. How cute is that? And this would be a perfect way to give a gift if you were wanting to make like little pumpkin coasters in jute twine, or you could even make little dish scrubbies, little pumpkin dish scrubbies, and then put them in this basket and then give this as a gift. How cute would that be? That would be just adorable. So let's go ahead and get started, and I am going to show you how I made this little pumpkin pie basket. To make the basket, I used this jute twine. The brand name is called Hulison, and it comes with 15 different colors. And it comes in this reusable Ziploc bag, and each one is individually wrapped. So you can see I have color black, I have orange. There is one here. It's not really a white. It's more like an off-white or winter white, they might call it, or ivory. It's very light ivory color though. And then this one is like a pink or magenta. And then this one, navy blue. And this is a pretty color. This is turquoise. And let's see what else we have in there. Then there's a small one of the natural jute twine. And then there's a purple one. Then I have one that's in the color of brown. And then this one here is the color of gray. There's one that's a pink. And then here's a green. And then there's a second shade of green, which is like more of like a Kelly green. That's a lighter color green. There's one in the color of yellow. So you get 15 different colors. So the one I'm going to use on the basket today will be this orange color. And so I have another thing of jute twine here. And this is a pretty good size one that I have. I'm going to leave links in the description box below for all of the jute that I used to make this pumpkin pie basket. I'll show you the jute that I used to make my basket. It's called Hulison, and it is thickness is 2mm 3-ply, and I have purchased this set before. I really like it. It comes with several different colors, and it just makes it really nice to make baskets that you want to add a little bit of accent colors to. So, and I always get like a larger one of the natural jute twine, and then these are perfect for adding accent colors to your basket. I'm just going to go ahead and put these away. I just thought I'd show you all the pretty colors that comes in the set. And like I said, I will leave a link in the description box below in case you want to get the set, the same set that I used. The colors that I'm going to use for the basket is going to be the orange, and I'm going to use some of this as well because I want to make like the little cream, the whipped cream that goes on the top of the pie that I'll use for the handle to open the basket. To make the basket, I'm going to use a size I 9 5.0mm crochet hook, and I'm going to use some jute twine, and I'm going to actually work with 2 strands together to make the basket. So I did roll up some of it into a ball. That way I can work with 2 strands as I make the basket. That way it's just a little bit sturdier, and it won't be as thin, and that way it will hold its shape a lot nicer. So we're just going to work with 2 strands. So that's why I have the ball and the one that was in the skein, the pull skein. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So to start off, we're going to start off with a magic ring. So to make the magic ring, you want to go ahead and have the tails leaning down. You want to have the tails pointing down towards your table surface, just like that. And then you're going to wrap the jute across the top of your fingers and make an X mark on the top of your fingers right there. And then you're going to take your crochet hook and you're going to insert it underneath this strand here. And then have the hook facing down towards your fingers. Grab that strand in front of it, and it's actually 2 strands because we're working with 2 strands together. So grab that in front, pull it underneath, just like this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to twist your crochet hook upward and place it on top of that X mark, just like that. And then you're going to insert it underneath this strand here, just like this. And then pull that through that loop to create your magic ring. And then here's my magic ring. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work 6 single crochets around this magic ring, and we're going to work around the tails as well. So we're going to hold the tails along the circle as we work our stitches around the magic ring. So now I'm going to go ahead and work 6 single crochets into the center of the magic ring. It's 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now I'm going to go ahead and pull the tails of the magic ring just to close up that circle a little bit. And then I'm going to insert my hook into the very first single crochet when we begin the round, and I'm going to join with the slip stitch. And that completes round 1. So now I have a little circle here. When you work with the jute, you want to have like a looser tension. So it just depends on your tension. You might need to use a size J crochet hook if you have like a tight tension, because everyone works their tension a little bit differently. So if you have a tendency to make your stitches really tight, I would recommend using the size J crochet hook. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to chain 1, and then into that first stitch that we joined in, I'm going to do 2 single crochets. That's the first one. And then before I do my second one, I'm going to put a stitch marker in here so I know where I began my round. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook into it. So I'm just going to pull that through that stitch, and that's the beginning of the round. So now I know where I began my round. So now we're working on round 2. We did 1 single crochet into that. Okay, and then into that same stitch, I'm going to work a second single crochet. Okay, and then in every single stitch around, I'm going to work 2 single crochets into each stitch. So I'm going to do 2 single crochets into the next stitch. And then the next stitch will also have 2, because we're going to do 2 single crochets in each stitch. So we'll have 12 stitches, 12 single crochets when we finish this round. Since round 1 we had 6 single crochets, this round we're doing 2 single crochets in each stitch, so that means we'll have 12 single crochets. So now let's make sure I have my 12 single crochets. 11, 12. All right, so now I'm done with round 2. Now this kind of looks like a stitch, but it's not, and that's why if you end up with more stitches, what probably happened is you may have worked into that. That's actually the chain up that we did when we started round 2. So that's why it kind of looks like a stitch, but it's not. It's that chain up. So now that's why you want to definitely count your stitches. So now what we're going to do now is we're going to work in continuous rounds. So we're not going to do a slip stitch into this one. We're going to work our first single crochet right into that stitch where the stitch marker is. So I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch and then do a single crochet. Pull my tail to the magic ring, close it up a little bit more. All right, now I'm going to do my single crochet, and then I'm going to take my stitch marker out and move it up to this stitch to mark the beginning of round 3. All right, so now we did 1 single crochet into the first stitch. The next stitch we're going to work 2 single crochets into the same stitch. The next stitch, 1 single crochet. Next stitch we'll have 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next stitch, 1 single crochet, and then in the next stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then this next stitch, 1 single crochet. So what we're doing here in this round 3 is we're alternating between 1 single crochet, then we do an increase, which is 2 single crochets into the same stitch, then 1 single crochet, and then an increase, which is the 2 single crochets into the same stitch, then 1, then 2, and we do that all the way around. So this one had 1 single crochet, so we know the next one has an increase, so we want to do 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then 1 single crochet into the next one, and then this next stitch will have 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then this one, 1 single crochet. All right, in this next stitch we'll have 2 single crochets into the stitch. So this is the last stitch of the round, and we know it's the last stitch because it's the stitch just before the stitch marker. So into this stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And when you're done with round 3, you should have 18 single crochets. Okay, so for round 4, we're going to work into the stitch where the stitch marker is. That's the beginning of round 4. We're going to start off with 1 single crochet into that stitch. And then I'm going to move my stitch marker up to this round. All right, so now the next stitch, 1 single crochet. So the first 2 stitches of this round 4, 1 single crochet each. This next stitch is going to have an increase stitch, so we're going to do 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then the next 2 stitches, 1 single crochet each. That's 1. Next one has 1 single crochet. And then the next stitch will have 2 single crochets into the same stitch. The next 2 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then this next stitch will be an increase stitch, so we're going to work 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Okay, so that stitch had 2 single crochets. Then we're going to work 1 single crochet into the next 2 stitches. So this one will have 1, next one will have 1 single crochet. And then the next stitch will be an increase stitch. I'm going to work 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next 2 stitches, 1 single crochet each. Next stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next 2 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then the next stitch, which is the last stitch of the round because it's the stitch just before the stitch marker, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And that completes round 4. When you're done with round 4, you should have 24 single crochets. Okay, so for round 5, I'm going to do a single crochet into that stitch where the stitch marker is, and that will be the first stitch of round 5. And then I'm going to move my stitch marker up to that stitch, and then I'm going to do a single crochet in the next 2 stitches. So the first 3 stitches of round 5 had 1 single crochet each because we started the round where the stitch marker is. We did a single crochet and then a single crochet in the next 2 stitches. So that's the first 3 stitches of round 5 with the single crochet. The next stitch is going to be an increase stitch. We're going to do 2 single crochets into that same stitch. And then the next 3 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then the next stitch will be an increase stitch. I'm going to do 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Then the next 3 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then this next stitch will be an increase stitch. I'm going to do 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then the next 3 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then the next stitch will be an increase stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next 3 stitches, 1 single crochet each. The next stitch will be an increase stitch. I'm going to do 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then the next 3 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then this stitch here is the last stitch of round 5. It's the stitch just before the stitch where the stitch marker is. So that's how we know that's the last stitch of round 5. And I'm going to do 2 single crochets into that stitch. And that completes round 5. When you're done with round 5, you should have 30 single crochets. Okay, so for round 6, we're going to do 1 single crochet in every single stitch around. Okay, so for round 6, I'm going to start where the stitch marker is, and I'm going to insert my hook in just the back loops only. So here's the front loops and the back. So I'm going to insert my hook in the back loop and do a single crochet. And then I'm going to move my stitch marker up, and that will mark the beginning of round 6. And then I'm going to do 1 single crochet in every single stitch around, working in just the back loop only. Continue to work my single crochets, working in the back loop of the stitch. And you can see that it will start to curl up, and that's what you want to see. Because we're not doing any increased stitches for this round, we're just doing 1 single crochet, so it will start to curl up for the sides of the pie crust. Okay, so we have 1 more stitch to work for this round. And that completes round 6. And like I said, it should start curling up now, and that's what we want. So for round 7, we're going to do 1 single crochet in every single stitch, but this time we're going to work underneath both loops. We're not going to work just in the back loops. We're just going to work underneath the whole stitch, both the front and back loop. So we're just doing a regular single crochet, working in both loops. So now I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker there for that first stitch of round 7. And then 1 single crochet in every single stitch around, working underneath both loops, not just the back loop this time. So no increased stitches for round 7. Just 1 single crochet in every single stitch, because we're going to continue to work the sides of our little pie crust. Okay, 1 more stitch for this round, and that completes round 7. So you can see the sides of our pie crust is now starting to form here and starting to curl up more. Now you can see that the sides of the pie crust are starting to form and build up along the sides of our basket. Okay, so for round 8, it's a repeat of round 7. 1 single crochet in every single stitch. And we're working underneath both loops. 1 single crochet in every single stitch around, working in both loops of the stitch. So no increased stitches, just one single crochet in every single stitch. Okay, and that completes round 8. Okay, so now we're done with the sides of the pie crust. So for round 9, what we're going to do is we are going to work into the stitch, working in just the back loops only, and we're going to do a slip stitch. And we're going to do that all the way around. When you do the slip stitches, I recommend that you change your hook size to a larger crochet hook. I'm going to switch to a size K, 10.5, 6.50 millimeter crochet hook. You can use a J or a 10. I just recommend that you use a larger hook because when you work these slip stitches along the edge, for this round, you want to make sure that your tension is not too tight. And if you use this, then what's going to happen is it's going to curl in like this if your tension's too tight, and we don't want that. So we want it to maintain its shape here. So we want to go ahead and use a crochet hook that's 1 or 2 sizes larger. So I'm going to use a size K, 10.5, 6.50 millimeter crochet hook to do the slip stitches. And when we work the slip stitches, we're going to work in just the back loop only. So if you look at the top of your stitch, you just insert your hook like right in between the 2 strands and work in just the back loop. We're not going to work in the front loop. We're just going to work in the back loop only for the entire round for all of the stitches in round 9. And we're going to do a slip stitch with the larger crochet hook. And I'm going to go ahead and move this stitch marker up. That way I know where I began round 9. So I'm just going to continue working around doing my slip stitches. And even though we're using a larger crochet hook, we still want to make sure that our tension is not too tight when we work the slip stitches. And this here is going to create the ridge for when we put the lid on the basket, and then it also makes the basket a little sturdier and hold its shape better. So to make sure I'm not doing the slip stitches too tightly, I'm kind of pulling up the loop and then pulling it up just a little bit before I pull it through. So I pull it up a little bit and then pull it through. And if you're not sure how to do a slip stitch, I do have a tutorial on how to do the slip stitch, and I'll leave an iCard in the corner that you can click on, and I'll also leave a link in the description box below. That way, if you want to watch my tutorial on how to do a slip stitch before you continue this round, if you're not really sure how to do a slip stitch, for anyone who's new to crocheting, I want to make sure that you have that option to watch that video if you're not familiar with how to do a slip stitch. Okay, so I'm working my tension loosely all around with slip stitches. And you can see how around here where we don't have the slip stitches, it kind of flops a little bit. It's not, so you can see the stitches, like the part of the crust where we don't have the slip stitches, where it bends really easy and it kind of doesn't hold its shape as well. But once you put the slip stitches, see how much sturdier it makes that edge. It really does keep it from collapsing in as much as the ones without the slip stitches. So it does help it maintain its shape and make it sturdier. But it also leaves that ridge for when we put the lid on for the basket. And see, I'm inserting my hook into the stitch, pulling up a loop and just pulling it up a little bit just to make sure the tension stays nice and loose and not too tight. All right, so that pie crust is really almost done. Okay, so I just have 2 more stitches to work for round 9. Okay, so that completes round 9. I did 1 round of slip stitches in every single stitch, working in just the back loops only. And then here's the stitch with the stitch marker, so now I know to end my round just before where the stitch marker is. So now for round 10, we're going to work the edge of the pie crust. So if you look at our stitches, here's our slip stitches, and then right underneath it, you see like that strand there? We're going to insert a hook into that. So like along the edge, you see how there's these loops right here? These are the front loops from when we work the slip stitches in the back loop. We're going to work in the front loop this time because we want this ridge to be inside of the basket a little bit from when we put the lid on. So this is actually the front loop of the stitch. When we worked in round 8, we inserted our hook into the back loop to work the slip stitches for round 9. This is the front loop. We're going to work in the front loop now for round 10. I'm going to switch back to my smaller crochet hook, size I, or 9, 5.50 millimeter crochet hook. And now I'm going to insert my hook into that strand that's right underneath. That's the front loop from round 8. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take my stitch marker out here because I know after I finish the stitch I'll go ahead and put it back in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a loop and I'm going to do a slip stitch, and then I'm going to do a half double crochet into that stitch, and then I'm going to put my stitch marker into that stitch right there. That was the slip stitch that we began round 10 with. Okay, and then we did, because in the first stitch we did for round 10 we did a slip stitch and a half double crochet. So now find the next front loop of the stitch. So if you look at the stitches here, that's round 9, right underneath it you'll find that strand, that front loop from the previous round. Just insert your hook right up like that. So I'm inserting a hook into the stitch like this. Along the side you'll see those ridges, that's your front loops. And then I'm going to do a slip stitch, and then a half double crochet into that same stitch. And then find the next one. So if you look, you can, if you're having trouble finding it, just find the top of your slip stitch, your V stitch, and then right underneath it is that extra strand of yarn. That's the front loop from round 8. So you just, along the side here, you just stick your hook right in there like that from the bottom of the crust upward, and then we're going to do a slip stitch and a half double crochet into that same stitch. So now you can see the pie crust taking shape here along the edge. So find your next stitch right here, slip stitch and half double crochet into the same stitch, and then you find your next stitch. Remember, if you're having trouble finding it, find your V stitch for your slip stitch, and then right underneath it seems like there's that extra strand. That's the one you're inserting the hook under. I'm going to do in each one of those stitches a slip stitch and a half double crochet. So slip stitch and then half double crochet into the same stitch. Next stitch, same thing, slip stitch and half double crochet into the same stitch. We're going to do that all the way around. All right, so in every single one of these stitches along the side, we're going to do the same thing. Slip stitch and a half double crochet into the same stitch. Real easy. Once you locate where you're working into, which, like I said, you can kind of see it if you look at the slip stitch, and then right underneath it, you see those ridges there? That's the front loop from the previous round, round 8. Just turn it to the side, and then you just insert your hook up this way. Do a slip stitch and a half double crochet into the same stitch. And you're going to do that all the way around. And see how by doing that slip stitch, you have that ridge that's inside here? Because if we didn't do that, when you put your lid, it's just going to fall in. It won't hold it. So you want to have that ridge there, because then if you can see it sticks out a little bit along the edges. So that way when you put the lid on it, it sits right on that nice edge there and it won't fall in. That way, if you didn't have anything inside the basket, your lid would rest against this here. And that way if your lid's going to rest against this edge where we did the slip stitches. So that's why we needed to do it that way. Okay, so every single stitch is the same. 2 stitches in every single stitch. We're doing a slip stitch and a half double crochet in every single stitch. And that gives that nice crusted edge, just like you would see on a pie crust, or that way you have that nice little pie crust along the edge. Looks really cute. Okay, so same way all the way around. Slip stitch, half double crochet into the same stitch. Next one, slip stitch, half double crochet into the same stitch. And see how that really does look like the edge of a pie? How cute. So like I said, I'm going to show you again. You insert your hook in this loop only, not into the slip stitches. That stitch right here, which is the front loop from the previous row, so it's right underneath that. And it's easy to see if you turn it to the side. So you just insert your hook underneath that part only, not the stitch here, but the front loop from round 8. And then we're going to do that all the way around. So it's the same thing once you know where to insert your hook. Okay, so slip stitch into that stitch and a half double crochet into the same stitch. So each stitch has a slip stitch and a half double crochet. And just repeat it all the way around. If I'd done it with just one strand of the jute, it would have just kind of collapsed in. It wouldn't hold its shape really well, so that's why you want to work with 2 strands. Now, if you do have a really thick jute that's really stiff, that's not, as pliable as this, you might be able to just use 1 strand. But if it's a regular crafting type jute, then you're definitely going to want most likely 2 strands, because this is it's not a real thick jute. Like if you went to one of those hardware stores and picked up a thing of jute, those types of jutes are really kind of thick sometimes and not really meant to crochet with. They're a little, you can, it's just going to be a lot more effort because it's not going to be very pliable. So if you have something like that and you want to attempt making the basket, you can. It's just going to be a little bit harder to work your stitches, and you're obviously going to want a larger crochet hook, and you may just need 1 strand if you have one of the jutes that are really thick. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and continue around the same way. And this would look really cute if you made a larger basket too. And you might even want to work with 3 strands if you want to make it really, a full-size pie basket. Like if you want to make a basket that was the size of a regular size pie, I would probably recommend even 3 strands. And of course, making more rounds with increases. And then, maybe the sides would be just a little bit, maybe one more round in the side as well. So maybe sometime I'll make that as well, just to see how that comes out. So if you look from the top view here, if you look, you can see those are the slip stitches. And that's making that nice little ridge for the lid to sit on. And that's why we needed to do that. Slip stitch, half double crochet, next stitch, a slip stitch, half double crochet, next stitch, slip stitch, half double crochet, okay, the next stitch, same thing, slip stitch, half double crochet. We're almost done with our pie crust. Next stitch, slip stitch, half double crochet, one more stitch for this round, slip stitch, half double crochet. All right, so that completes round 10 for the edge of our pie crust. So then here's where the stitch marker is, and we started with a slip stitch, so we're just going to slip stitch into that slip stitch to end round 10. All right, and then pull through with a slip stitch, and then we will cut the yarn here, or actually jute, sorry, it's not yarn. We're going to cut the jute. So now I'll go ahead and get a pair of scissors to cut the jute, and then I'll just pull that through to fasten off and weave in my ends, and then make sure that I pull the tails for the magic ring, and then I'll pull the tail of the magic ring, make sure that the hole is all the way closed up, which it is, and then I'll weave that in as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the tail here of the jute twine. I actually have 2 tails because we worked with 2 strands together. I already joined with the slip stitch here, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that through and give it a tug to fasten off. And then now I'm going to weave in the tails. If you get a darning needle that has a good size eye, you'll be able to put both of those through when you weave them in. Okay, then I'll trim those little tails there. I'm going to weave these tails in. This was the magic ring. Okay, so we have finished the pie crust for the basket. Looks really cute. And then we have this edge here for the lid to set on. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make the lid for the pumpkin basket. And I'm going to use this orange colored jute for my pumpkin lid for the basket. And there should be a little pull skein in the center. It pulls right out the center here. Okay, so for the lid, I'm only going to use 1 strand of the jute. I'm not going to use 2. And I'm going to start off with a magic ring, just like we did when we started the pie crust. And I'm going to use the same size crochet hook, the size iron 9 5.50 millimeter crochet hook. So to make the magic ring, I'll show you that again. You hold the tail down towards your table surface, and then you wrap the yarn over these two fingers, then over the top and make an X mark. And then you're going to take your crochet hook and you're going to face it down with the hook part facing down towards your fingers, and you're going to slide it underneath this strand here, and then you're going to grab that strand that's in front of it, pull it underneath, and then you're going to twist your crochet hook up to sit right on top of that X, and then you're going to insert it underneath this strand here. See if you can see that. So this one right here, and then pull it through that loop to create your magic ring. Okay, so I have my magic ring now. Then we're going to work 6 single crochets into the center of the magic ring. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker into that very first stitch that we did. And then I'm going to pull the tail of the magic ring to close that up a little bit. And then, working in continuous rounds without joining with a slip stitch, I'm just going to work right into that first stitch where the stitch marker is, and I'm going to do 2 single crochets into that stitch. But before I do my second single crochet into that stitch, I'm going to move my stitch marker up to mark the beginning of round 2. And then I'm going to do my second single crochet into that stitch. And then I'm going to work 2 single crochets in every single stitch around. And when you're done with round 2, you will have 12 single crochets. Okay, so for round 3, I'm going to start in the stitch where the stitch marker is and do 1 single crochet, and then I will move my stitch marker up. That way I will know where I began round 3. And then into the next stitch, 2 single crochets, and then the next stitch 1 single crochet, and then the next stitch 1 single crochet. The next stitch I'm going to work 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next stitch will have 1 single crochet. So on this round 3, we're alternating with 1. We're going to alternate by doing 1 stitch, then an increase, then 1 single crochet, then an increase, then 1 single crochet, and then an increase. And the increase is 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and we're going to do that all the way around. So this one had 1 single crochet, so the next one will be an increase, which will have 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next one will have 1 single crochet. Next one we will increase by doing 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next one will have 1 single crochet. Next we'll have 2 into the same stitch, then 1 into the next, and then the stitch just before the stitch marker, that is going to be the last stitch of round 3. We will work an increase by doing 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And that completes round 3. When you're done with round 3, you will have 18 single crochets. All right, for round 4, we're going to start with the stitch where the stitch marker is, 1 single crochet into that stitch, moving my stitch marker up. Okay, so the stitch So now, and then the next stitch I'm going to work 1 single crochet. So the first 2 stitches of round 4 have 1 single crochet each. The next stitch we're going to work 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then the next 2 stitches 1 single crochet each, and then the next stitch 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then next 2 stitches 1 single crochet each. And then the next stitch 2 single crochets into the same stitch. The next 2 stitches 1 single crochet each, and then the next stitch 2 single crochets into the same stitch. The next 2 stitches will have 1 single crochet each, and then this next stitch will have 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then the next 2 stitches 1 single crochet each, and then the last stitch of this round 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And now we are done with round 4. When you're done with round 4, you should have 24 single crochets. Okay, so for round 5, we're going to start in the stitch where the stitch marker is, and we're going to do 1 single crochet, moving my stitch marker up to that stitch. That way I mark the first stitch of round 5. And then into the next 2 stitches, I'm going to do 1 single crochet each. So the first 3 stitches of round 5, 1 single crochet each. The next stitch 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then into the next 3 stitches 1 single crochet each. The next stitch will have 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then the next 3 stitches 1 single crochet each. The next stitch 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Next 3 stitches 1 single crochet each, and then this next stitch 2 single crochets into the same stitch. The next 3 stitches will have 1 single crochet each, and then this next stitch 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then the next 3 stitches 1 single crochet each, and then the last stitch of round 5 we will do 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And your last stitch should always end in the stitch just before the stitch marker, and each row begins where the stitch marker is, so or each round. So now we are done with round 5. When you're done with round 5, you should have 30 single crochets. We're going to work one more round because we want to have 6 rounds for our lid for our pie basket. All right, so starting in the stitch where the stitch marker is, 1 single crochet. I'm going to move my stitch marker up. Since we're working continuous rounds, you definitely want to move that stitch marker up every time you start a round. All right, so we did 1 single crochet where the stitch marker was. So that is the first stitch of round 6. So the next 3 stitches, 1 single crochet each. So the first 4 stitches of round 4, 1 single crochet each. The next stitch is an increase, so we do 2 single crochets into that same stitch. And then the next 4 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then the next stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then the next 4 stitches, 1 single crochet each. The next stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then the next 4 stitches, 1 single crochet each. The next stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then the next 4 stitches, 1 single crochet each. Okay, so that was 1 single crochet into the last 4 stitches. The next stitch, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And then the next 4 stitches, 1 single crochet each. And then the next stitch, which is the last stitch of round 6, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Okay, and that completes round 6. When you're done with round 6, you should have 36 single crochets. The next step is we want this to be double thick. We are going to create a second round with the natural jute twine. So now this jute is a little bit thinner than this jute twine, the natural jute twine. So we wouldn't want to work with 2 of these to make, 2 rounds to make this double thick, because we are going to need 2 rounds for the lid to make it sturdier when we sit on the basket, because we worked with 2 strands of the jute when we did the pie crust. So for the lid, we also want to have a double thick lid. So because the colored jute costs a bit more than if you bought natural jute twine, so that's why, when you work with the colors, you want to just make 1 round for the lid, and then we'll do 1 round with the natural jute twine to use to make this double thick, because the natural, this part will be on the outside when we place it on top of the basket, and then the other side would be on the inside. So that's why we're going to do it that way. So this was 6 rounds of the jute twine. So this was 6 rounds to create the lid with the orange jute. Now, so I'm going to go ahead and work up around with the natural jute twine. And it's just a repeat of what I did here, so I wouldn't have to show you each step again. I'll just work it up real quick. You'll see that when you work with jute, you will get some pieces of fiber that flake off when you're working with it, but that's normal. So this will clean right up. It's no problem. Okay, and this is just a repeat of what I did here. Okay, so because we're not quite done yet, we're not going to fasten off just yet, because we're going to need to work some more rounds, but not yet. So I'm going to show you how to do the magic ring again. So this will be the 3rd time I showed you how to do the magic ring in this video. So if you're new to crocheting and you have not used the magic ring before, hopefully by the time we finish this video, you will be very comfortable with working with the magic ring. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to have the tail down this way towards your table surface, and then you're going to wrap the yarn over the top of your fingers to make a little X mark on the top of your fingers, just like this. And then you take your crochet hook, point the hook down towards your fingers. This is the hook, so you want that facing down towards your fingers, and then you're going to slide that underneath this loop here, right there, and then grab that strand that's in front, pull it underneath, and then what you do, you just twist your hook upward, so the hook is now facing this way, and then you want to grab that, and then you're going to put your hook underneath this strand here and pull that through that loop, and that is how you make your magic ring. Okay, so this is going to be a repeat exactly the same as this round. We're going to do 6 rounds with the natural jute. So I can work this one up. I'm going to go ahead and work this one up real quick, because if you want to, it's just a repeat of this. You just can rewind and do a second one in the natural jute twine. So this is 6 single crochets into this magic ring. Okay, round 2, 2 single crochets into each stitch. When you're done with round 2, you should have 12 single crochets. Then round 3, start with 1 single crochet, and then for this third round, you start with 1 single crochet, then you do an increase, and an increase is going to be 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Then you work 1 single crochet, then an increase, then 1 single crochet, then increase. Do that all the way around, and you'll have 18 single crochets when you're done with round 3. Okay, so round 4, we start with a single crochet into the stitch where the stitch marker is. And you definitely want to use your stitch marker since we're working in continuous rounds. So it's really easy to lose track of where you start your rounds if you don't use a stitch marker. Okay, so for the first 2 stitches of round 4, 1 single crochet each. So this next stitch will have 1 single crochet. So the first 2 stitches, 1 single crochet each, and then you'll work an increase, which is 2 single crochets into the same stitch, then 1 single crochet into the next 2, then 2 single crochets into the next 2 increase, then 1 single crochet into the next 2, then increase, then 1 stitch into 2, then increase. Do that all the way around. And then when you're done with round 4, you'll have 24 single crochets. So I did 1 single crochet, then another one with 1 single crochet, so I'm going to do an increase here with 2 into the same stitch. Okay, so that completes round 4. So for round 5, I'm start in the stitch where the stitch marker is with 1 single crochet. Okay, and then the next 2 stitches, 1 single crochet each. We started in this stitch here where the stitch marker is. We did 1 single crochet, then we worked 1 single crochet in the next 2, because the first 3 stitches are round 4, 1 single crochet each. And then we'll do an increase, which will be 2 single crochets into the same stitch, then 1 single crochet into 3, then an increase, then 1 into 3, then increase. Do that all the way around. And it is a repeat of exactly what we did with this orange round, but I'm just reminding you in case you're crocheting along and you just want to follow the video without having to rewind. So I'm just kind of going over the steps again to remind you, and for anyone that's new to crocheting. Okay, that completes round 5. When you're done with round 5, you should have 30 single crochets. Okay, so we have one more round to work because we want to have 6 rounds just like we did with the orange one. So one more round. So starting with the stitch where the stitch marker is for round 6, we're going to work 1 single crochet, moving that stitch marker up. Real important when you're working in continuous rounds. All right, and then 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So since we started in the stitch where the stitch marker is, we did a single crochet, then we did 1 single crochet in the next 3. The first 4 stitches of round 6, 1 single crochet each. Then we'll work an increase, which is 2 single crochets into the same stitch, then 1 single crochet into the next 4, then increase, 1 single crochet into the next 4, then increase, and we'll do that all the way around. Okay, so the first 4 stitches, 1 single crochet. This one's going to be the increase, which is 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and 1 into 4, then increase, just 2 single crochets, then 1 into 4, and then 2 into the next, and 1 into 4, then increase, which is 2 into the same, and then 1 into 4 stitches. Next one we'll have 2 into the same stitch, and then the next 4 stitches, 1 single crochet each, and then the last stitch of round 6, 2 single crochets into the same stitch. And that completes round 6. So now we have 2 rounds. We have one with the natural jute twine and one with the orange. And you might find that if your jute is a little bit thicker than if the natural jute is a little bit thicker than this one, then it might look slightly bigger, but that's okay because we can stretch just a little bit over it. All right. Oops, that unraveled on me. Let me get that stitch. It's trying to sneak away. To do that stitch again here. All right. So now we are going to place this one on top, just like that. And what we're going to do is we are going to place the hook back into the orange jute twine. I'm going to fasten this one off now. Okay, so now we can go ahead and fasten off with the round for the natural jute twine, but we are going to not fasten off with the orange just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the tail, and I'm going to leave a little bit so I can weave it in. And then I'm going to take the stitch marker out here, and I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch, pull up a loop, and then pull it right through to do a slip stitch. I'm joining with a slip stitch, and just pull it through to fasten off. And then I'm going to place this one on top, right like that. And I am going to insert my hook back into that loop. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to insert my hook Okay, so I took my stitch marker. I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch where the stitch marker was. And then I'm going to find a stitch on the natural jute twine, the natural round, insert it through both stitches, one from the orange and one from there. And then I'm going to yarn over and pull through. And I'm going to do a single crochet. Then I'm going to find the next stitch, insert it underneath both loops of the orange round, and then find the very next stitch from the one that's behind it on the jute twine, yarn over, pull through both rounds, and single crochet. And then next stitch, and then the very next stitch of the orange, and then insert your hook to the stitch from the orange round and the one from the other round behind it. Yarn over and pull through both, and then single crochet. And that's how we're going to join these two rounds together. Just go ahead and do single crochets all the way around, working through both rounds so that we can connect them together. Okay, and then same thing all the way around. Find the next stitch of the orange round, then insert it through the next stitch of the round behind it. Yarn over, pull through to connect them to, and then single crochet. That's how you're going to connect them together, just like that. So we're going to do that all the way around. We're not going to skip any of the stitches on either round. We're just going to keep working on each stitch, connecting them together. So you can see that's why I didn't do another round, because by the time we do this, then it's going to fit just perfect for the lid. All right. Just keep working around, connecting the two rounds together with single crochets. So by having the two rounds together, it'll make our lid just as sturdy as the pie crust. Since we did this with two strands of yarn, this is a great way to have the double strength of the cover or the lid for the basket without having to use two rounds of the orange jute, which would be, more expensive than this type of jute. So you can see I'm inserting underneath both the front and the back loop of each round, so working through all 4 loops, in other words, because both loops from the orange one and both the front and back loop of the round behind it, I'm inserting underneath all of them, and then doing my single crochet to connect them. And then you can weave in this tail a little bit or work right over it, either way. I'm actually going to do a little bit of both. So I'm going to weave this in, and first I'm going to work over the tail that's left, and then I'll weave the rest of it in. So that's what I mean by doing a little bit of both, working over the tail and weaving in the rest of it. All right, so you see here. All right, so now I'm going to work over these tails a little bit. Okay, so I've finished my round of single crochets to connect the two pieces together. So now what we are going to do is we're going to do a round of slip stitches. Now we're not going to do the slip stitches on the right side. We're going to turn our work and we're going to do the slip stitches on the wrong side. And the reason why we want to do that is if you look at the right side, it's kind of if you look at the right side, it's kind of curling this way, but we want the lid to fit nicely on the basket. So what we're going to do is by turning it and then doing the slip stitches, it will pull the stitches this way and then it will fit very nicely right on the basket. So this time we're not going to switch to the larger crochet hook to do the slip stitches. We're just going to use the same size crochet hook to do a round of slip stitches. So let me go ahead and do one slip stitch in every single stitch around. So you can see how it's pulling this way now, which is perfect because it's pulling this way. So now it will sit very nicely right on there. Our lid will look perfect on our little basket that way. So I'm just going to continue around doing slip stitches. And I am working underneath both loops when I do the slip stitches. Okay, and then I'm just going to join with the slip stitch to the last stitch. Okay, and now I have finished working my slip stitches all the way around the edge. Now I'm ready to fasten off, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the jute twine here. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull that tail right through that loop, give it a tug to fasten off. And then I'm going to go ahead and weave in all the tails. Okay, so I've finished the lid for the basket. So now we just need to work on making the little bit of whipped cream that goes on the center of our lid, and that whipped cream will be the handle to put the lid on our basket. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and place the lid on top of the basket. How cute does that look? It is cute. So that's why we did this little ridge here, so that way the lid rests right on there and it doesn't fall in. How cute is that? So let's go ahead and make our little whipped cream for the top of our pumpkin basket. Okay, and then we're going to start with a slip knot. And we're going to go ahead and chain 9 chains. Okay, there's my 9 chains. I'm going to skip the first chain that's closest to the hook and into the next chain, the second chain from the hook. I'm going to work 3 single crochets into that same chain. And then I'm just going to do 3 single crochets in every single chain. And then you'll see that by doing that, it's going to start to curl, and that's what we want. So we're going to do 3 single crochets in every single chain. Okay, so I have worked 3 single crochets in every single chain, and now I have my little whipped cream for the top of my pie. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a tail, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail because we want to be able to sew it on. So I'm going to go like that, and then I'm just going to yarn over and pull that through. Give it a tug to fasten off. So now you can see by doing the 3 single crochets in each one how it curled up just perfect for the whipped cream topping. So now I'm going to take my lid here and we are going to sew that on right on the center. Go ahead and put this aside here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and insert here. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and sew it through to the other side. And then I'm going to take the other one and also bring that to the other side. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just sew this on until I'm happy with it. So then I'll go ahead and work around the bottom base a little bit, so like that. So you can kind of stretch it and then you'll just kind of make that first ring. You'll sew that on like that. And then that will sit perfectly on top. So you're going to work by, so then you're going to work this kind of center that there, that first layer. Just pull it through. And then go back down through this here. And then through to the back. Okay, so you can see how I have that little circle there, and then the rest of it just kind of sits right on there. Then I'm going to go ahead and sew that back down through. I'm going to weave this in a little bit too. Alright, so there's the little whipped cream in the center. How cute is that? And that's your little handle to lift it on and off of your basket. So cute. How cute is that little basket? It's so cute. I think it came out just adorable. It's so cute. Little pumpkin pie basket. And then you can fill it with little coasters or little dish scrubbies and give this away as a little gift set. How cute would that be? Just adorable. So you could just fill this up with little dish scrubbies, little pumpkin dish scrubbies, and it would be so cute. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial today on how to make this adorable pumpkin pie basket using jute twine. I hope that everyone has a happy Thanksgiving, and I want to thank you for watching. Have a great day.